It's pretty cool to see him performing at the level he is. In terms of my future, that's not ideal. But, I'm still young. I'm only 21. I'm not in a huge rush, and, for me, staying at Haas for the foreseeable is not a bad thing. I feel like they're on a good trajectory, this team, and I'm really happy to be on the journey with it.
Would you ever consider leaving the Ferrari family?
My goal remains to be a Ferrari driver one day. Of course, I don't want to be sitting around for 3, 4, 5 years waiting for a seat to become available, because there's no guarantees. You can be wasting your best years. My ultimate goal is maybe a bit selfish, and that's okay, because that's the reason I'm here, and that's because I want to be fighting for world championships. So if I can have that opportunity wherever, I will take it.
Welcome everybody to F1 Beyond the Grid, and my guest this week is Ollie Bearman. Ollie, great to see you. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, and excited for this race weekend that we're having in Budapest, and more than all excited for a summer break after that as well.
Well, let's talk about the summer break. How do you approach the summer shutdown? What does it mean to you? Is it a chance to delve into data that you don't normally have time for, or is it shut down, don't think about Formula One for a couple of weeks?
I think the latter, to be honest. You have a bit of time at the start of the first week, which for us is already the summer break, but for the engineers is not yet the summer break. They can still work in the factory and look through things, and of course they'll be very hard at work. On my side, there's always a bit of post-event kind of work that we do with the team, just an hour or two on Teams calls, and that's just nice to kind of be able to move on for the summer break, because if you do the Budapest debrief on the race week of Zandvoort after 3 weeks of summer break, maybe you can't even get the race out of your mind. So it's nice to close the chapter of Budapest and then move on to the real summer, and that will be about relaxing, recharging the batteries, and enjoying some time with friends and family.
So what does an ideal rest day look like for Ollie Bearman?
Well, of course, I live in a beautiful part of the world, in Monaco, close to the sea. If I'm not training...
Will you train during the break?
I will train, but not in the first week and a half, I would say. So I'm going to spend, first of all, a week at home, and in that week I won't train. Maybe I'll play some paddle or something, but I won't do any specific training. And then I will do like a week and a half with my family as well. And I think in the first half of that vacation, I won't train as well. And then the final kind of week and a half, I'll make sure to bring my bike when we go on holiday. And then I also have a training camp of 3 or 4 days to make sure all of the weight I inevitably put on can come back off for the next race in Zandvoort.
And what does the training camp look like? Is that a lot of cycling?
Yeah, it's actually a cycling camp that I'm doing. I'm going to Switzerland with some friends into the mountains, actually, where they did the Tour de Suisse, or where it finished. So yeah, it's actually I've really got into cycling recently, and with a few friends we've had a cool idea to go into the mountains. It's also a bit of altitude training, so I'm really looking forward to it.
Do you train with Pogacar in Monaco? Have I read that? Yeah,
sometimes with Tadej we go. Very much not a training day for him, but certainly a training day for me. To be honest, I spend a lot of time with Tadej whenever we're both in town, which is quite rarely. And whenever he's on an easy day, we try to go out together. Also with Carlos, we often do a group like that, cycling. Last time it was quite funny because we did quite a big ride. It was, a 4-hour ride. And yeah, it was a really tough ride for me. I was pushing to the limit, and Tadej's average heart rate was 99, something like that, and mine was 150. So it's quite, it puts you in your place when you go.
I wonder what his VO2 max is.
Well, at least double mine, I would say. Yeah.
But actually, while we're talking about cycling, you've got a side hustle, haven't you?
Yeah, actually, I don't know if you saw, I did the career ladder with the guy who does the career ladder. His name's Max, and it's quite a popular thing. And well, obviously he would have guessed his job is to guess my job, you know, and obviously it's quite easy to guess that I'm an F1 driver. So his task was to guess what my second job may be. And yeah, I have a bike shop with a few friends. We've opened up a bike shop above Monaco. It's a really popular area for cycling. It's in La Turbie. And yeah, it's really cool. We're really happy with how it's going. And, you know, it's more of a passion project for all of us because we really enjoy cycling, and it's nice to have a bit of a say in how the shop works. You know, it's our own banana bread, it's our own cakes, so it's nice, it's enjoyable.
I was going to say, every good cycling shop has to have a good cafe, right?
Exactly, that's really the main thing. You know, we have we focus on good coffee. Although I don't really enjoy coffee, I know it's incredibly important, and cyclists are very picky about coffee. That's one thing I've learned. But what I do enjoy is the cakes, and we have good cakes, so I'm proud.
Just before we move on from cycling, Pogacar, is it interesting to compare sports with him? The pressures he's under when he's, you know, Tour de France is going on at the minute versus the pressures you're under. Do you discuss things like that?
Yeah, sometimes we talk about handling pressure and you know, the difficulties that we face in our respective sports. At the end of the day, we're you know, both at the top level of our respective sports, you know, Formula One and World Tour cycling. And I think in every professional sport, often the pressures and the challenges and you know, the work ethic has to be the same. On one side, in cycling, it's very much a physical game. You know, you need to be absolutely, you know, 100% physically to go and perform at the best. On our side, it's not that you push the body to the full limits, you know, physically, but mentally, I would say it's very, very, you know, challenging, and that's where you can separate yourself from the others. So yeah, it's interesting to share experiences with other sportsmen and also with tennis players and other sportsmen. I enjoy, you know, spending time with them because I think you learn a lot from people who are, you know, as successful as Tadej, for example, in their respective sports.
Monaco is great for that, isn't it? You just walk around the streets and there are, you know, the greats from pretty much every current sport, aren't there?
Yeah, exactly. I'm really lucky to live there. I really enjoy living there, and thanks to living there, I have a great network of friends who understand what it's like to be a pro sportsman, because it's really difficult to convey that to someone who's not in it. So, you know, when you're talking to a tennis player or a cyclist, they both understand exactly the challenges that we face.
Now, Ollie, the last time you were on the show, a couple of years ago now.
I was going to say, it's been a while. It's been a while.
You'd only actually done 2 races, that amazing race for Ferrari, obviously, in Saudi Arabia, and then you'd done 1 race for Haas, scored points in both. But when you look back at that guy 2 years ago, how different is the Ollie Bearman today?
Yeah, I've certainly changed a lot in that time. And
in what way?
Well, it's how long do we have? It's certainly been a big change. I think, you know, the first one is my experience in F1, which has increased 100x, you know, since I did that race, in all those 2 races in Formula One. I feel like I have a much clearer idea of what my role is, where I sit within the team, and what I need to do every weekend. You know, those 2 races were really races where I had 2 shots to prove myself, to prove that I had what it took to be a full-time F1 driver. But, you know, then going in full-time and having that opportunity, then your goals change. You know, you need to have consistent results, have consistent performances, and that's something I really, really learned throughout last year and really improved on throughout last year. And if I look at myself 12 months ago, but even myself 6 months ago, I feel like I've come a long way as a driver in terms of my, you know, the consistency of my performance, but also, you know, how I work with the team, how I motivate the team. I find it much easier now to to put myself out of my comfort zone and try and lead the team forward. Because, you know, when I first came into F1 from F2, where, you know, you're kind of a client of the team, suddenly now the team looks for you for motivation, for inspiration, and that's something that doesn't, you know, change overnight. It's not easy to suddenly become the team leader, you know.
How much easier would that race that you did for Ferrari in Saudi Arabia be now? How much of a better job do you think you could do now?
Well, infinitely better. You know, I was in a really tough situation back then, and I feel like I would just, you know, understand everything much more now. I came into that weekend not having driven the tires, not having driven that car around that circuit, not having driven that car full stop actually, not having driven more than 2 days in an F1 car. So, you know, the odds were really stacked up against me. If I was to repeat that weekend, you know, I missed out on Q3 back then by nothing pretty much, and I know that I would easily make it through if I was to repeat that, and you know, I would hope to say that I would be fighting for the podium if I was to repeat that race. Now, then of course with this year's car, if I was to have that opportunity, things change, but I feel like, you know, in terms of a driver, I was happy with the performance I did back then given my experience, but now I have the tools to do a much better job.
This episode is sponsored by Hexclad. One of the things I'm most looking forward to over the summer break is having a bit more time at home. We really enjoy cooking as a family, and it's lovely to make a meal and then sit down to enjoy it together when we can. What nobody enjoys quite as much is the washing up afterwards, and often it's my job, and that's just one of the reasons I really like Hexclad. Their pans combine the performance of stainless steel with the convenience of non-stick, so you get excellent heat control and a proper sear without spending the rest of your evening scrubbing at the sink. They're dishwasher safe, easy to wipe clean, and even oven safe up to 480 degrees Celsius. The stainless steel handles stay cool while you cook, and I love that they're metal utensil safe too, so there's no need to switch tools halfway through. And for me, that's what good cookware should do. It should help you get the result you want without making the whole process feel like hard work, and leave you with more time to enjoy the food and the people you made it for. Every Hexclad product also comes with a lifetime warranty, which tells you a lot about how much confidence they have in what they make, and more than 1 million customers already use Hexclad. And Gordon Ramsay uses it both at home and in his restaurants, and we all know he's not exactly easy to please. So whether you're hosting all summer long or just want to make everyday cooking feel easier, this is the upgrade your kitchen deserves. For a limited time, our listeners get 10% off with our exclusive link. Just head to hexclad.co.uk/grid. That's Hexclad, hexclad.co.uk/grid. Offer excludes bundles and other items already on sale. Support our show and let them know we sent you. We're talking at the halfway point in the year. In terms of points, you're kind of half the total you were by the end of last year. What kind of a job do you think you've done so far this year?
Yeah, I think the points tally doesn't really tell the full story, because I've been really happy with my performances, and actually these last kind of 2 or 3 events, I feel like I've been performing at my highest level yet in Formula One, which is normal given my experience level is at its highest. But, you know, that's to say that basically the results don't match the effort and the hard work of myself and the team, and also the personal performance from all of those people. I was really happy with how we started the season, and we maximized points when we could, because we started with a really strong car, and the others had a few more challenges, particularly on the software side of things, which this year, as you know, has become very complicated. And then I feel like we've kind of tailed off a bit. We've been outdeveloped by our competition, and that's been a bit more painful. You know, these last few events, we simply haven't been in the fight for the points. However, you know, in those moments where the best you can achieve is a P15, I think you need to keep your head up and still take pride in the little wins. And the little wins are, you know, executing good qualifyings, executing good races, driving well, and these things I think I've been doing pretty well. So on that side, I've been really happy, and like I said, the points tally doesn't quite match up to that.
What did you think was possible after Australia and China, where you got those two brilliant points finishes? What do you think was going to be possible this year back then?
Yeah, I think we were P4 at the time in the constructors.
Yeah.
Obviously, Red Bull had a rocky start, but I stood up in front of the team a few weeks ago after a run of tough events, and just as a way to try and motivate them, because I felt like everyone's heads were getting down a bit, and I reminded them, like, guys, come on, we started the season fighting Red Bull. We have what it takes to do these things. And that's crazy to think about, considering where they are now, but it shows that we have a really good understanding of the regulations and the car. And at that stage, I really felt like we were able to be in the fight in the constructors for P5 or P6. Alpine was strong at the beginning, but Racing Bulls were also very strong at the beginning. And for me, those look to be our competition going forward. Then, they bought some upgrades on the car and just did a step ahead of us. They also had, some issues with race management. I remember, in China, I finished 5th in front of Pierre in 6th. But Pierre had an issue with energy, so I managed to overtake him and luckily stay in front. But he was quicker at that point, so they had their pace. We just had better execution. But, I was confident that with good upgrades throughout the year that we could hold on to that. I think, where our season has not come undone because we're at the halfway point, but where our first half has come undone is that in this type of era where, you're in a very immature time for the cars, every development you bring is a big step. It can swing the order by a huge amount. And there we get a bit exposed with our, lack of people, lack of flexibility because we outsource everything, lack of budget at the end, which is a fact. And, last year that wasn't the case. When you're 5 years into a cycle of regs, every upgrade you bring is marginal and it's not really changing a whole lot. And this year, like I said, these little updates aren't little anymore. They're huge, and that's where I feel like people have just outdeveloped us.
What does the second half of the year look like? Is there a lot coming?
Yeah, we have an update coming after the summer break, and I hope that can push us in the right direction and push us forwards. The aero department are doing a fantastic job with the limitations they face, which, sometimes feels like we're fighting with one hand tied behind our back. I feel like that's the sentiment that everybody has in a way, which is the challenge. But we're not using that as an excuse. It's just a fact. But yeah, we have some upgrades coming that the team are positive about them, and yeah, we just need to make that step forward, and then we can be on par with our competitors, and then hopefully continue on that trend. And the thing is that every upgrade you make sooner, the more you can add more performance on the car, if that makes sense. So, like I say, when you're budget limited, it's a challenge.
Ollie, you're speaking with great confidence now. You said a moment ago that you stood up in front of the team recently. Do you see yourself as the team leader? Because it's very much the behaviour of a driver who sees himself as the team leader.
Well, it's a role that I want to become, right? It's a role that's very important in Formula One, and for me, the driver is the most important, factor in when it comes to motivating the team, putting them in the good window. And that's easy to do when you're finishing in the top 5 every race. And, at the end of last year, when we're always in the points, everyone's over the moon, right? But when you go through a tough run, I think, all of the team members look to someone for inspiration and motivation. And I think that's a job that the driver has to fulfill. And that's something I've realized in the last few weeks, where we've been through a really tough run, like I said. And yeah, it was after Barcelona race that I had the idea. I spoke to Ayal and I just said, look, on Thursday in the next race, wherever the next race was, I want to stand up in front of the guys and just try to remind them who we are, basically. telling them how well we started, telling them, for example, how strong our pit stops were at the end of last year. I remember in Mexico when I finished 4th, it was the highest pressure pit stop of the season. We were head-to-head against Mercedes, and we did a faster pit stop than them. All of these things are easy to forget when you're going through a tough run, but reminding all of these guys what they're capable of doing is really important to keep them motivated. And even though in Austria, or I think it was Austria when I spoke to them,
the one after, yeah.
It didn't put us in the top 10, because it's not by talking to the guys that the car's magically 0.3 faster. I really felt a renewed sense of motivation from them, and like I said, I think it's an important thing.
Now, you mentioned Mexico a moment ago.
Ollie Bearman will get his personal best result in Formula One of P4.
Yes, come on! Good job!
What was it like having a Mercedes and a McLaren on your gearbox for so long?
Yeah, that was an interesting race, for sure. I remember, just because obviously all of the races are 300 Ks or just over 300 kilometers. So on a track like Mexico, it's 70 laps. Last week in Spa, it's 40s. But I remember after 5 laps or so, I was in P4 or P3 even. And I remember my engineer coming on the radio and saying, "Okay, Ollie, good job. We're P3. 65 laps to go." And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be a long day. Obviously the distance is the same, but it feels a whole lot longer when you've got that number of laps ahead of you. But honestly, the car was incredible that weekend. I was able to put it right on the limit every lap, not do any mistakes.
Ollie, what was interesting is that you hadn't even done FP1 that weekend, right?
Yeah, I didn't, and I had a tough FP2 as well.
Yeah.
And
so did you feel a little bit undercooked going into the race because you hadn't got the long run?
To be honest,
right?
I had a really good long run in FP2, and I saw it and I was like, that's super weird, because in the quali sim I had an issue and we couldn't get the quali pace out, but the other car, we didn't look hugely competitive, and on my side I didn't have a proper quali sim, so we looked to be not in the fight for Q3 basically. But then I did the high fuel, and I was like as quick as the Ferraris, as the McLarens. I was like, that's weird, maybe they're running more fuel than us, but we were at max fuel, so they couldn't have. So I was like a bit confused by that, really competitive race pace. But then actually it translated in the race. I was super quick in the race, and I think that was a tough Saturday, coming in, having not done any low fuel, but the guys put the car in an excellent setup window, and that proves, and we've had it a few times this year as well, when the car is really dialed in, it's so incredibly quick. It just feels like a real knife edge, and really tough to get it in that window.
Interesting point. God, there's so much to talk about, but you say on a knife edge, right? Driving the cars on the limit last year, ground effect, versus this year. Are your inputs slightly different this year?
It's changed a bit, because last year with the ground effect era, the balance in high speed was very much on the limit with the touching and the bouncing. There was always kind of, present. That's not the case anymore, and my back is very thankful for that, because that wasn't obviously the most comfortable thing. So the car is a bit more predictable through the speed range, and doesn't do any nowadays. It doesn't do any strange things, which we suffered a lot. When the rear would start bouncing, the loads go all over the place, and you start to suffer a lot. We suffered a bit more, I think, than other teams with that, but it was always there in the ground effect era. Now we don't have any of that, which is nice. But of course the car has quite a lot less downforce, and that's something you have to get used to. It moves around a bit more. You have to drive it a bit differently as a result of that. You can't be as aggressive on the brakes or as aggressive in the initial turn-in. But I feel like, I've adapted to that very well, and I'm quite happy with how much I'm getting out of this car, despite our underperformance, I would say, relative to competition.
And do you think you've driven some races this year as good as Mexico last year, but we just haven't necessarily kind of seen
it? For sure, and that's the thing that really hurts, because Mexico was a great weekend. It was really, really strong, but I felt like I'd also had stronger weekends in 2025. I mean, Qatar was a great example of a weekend where I really performed super well. I was running in the top 10 in the race behind the Ferrari, and then we had an issue in the pit stop and I DNF'd. But that was a weekend where I really didn't put a foot wrong, and I was super happy with my performance.
And
Similarly,
Sao Paulo.
Yeah, Sao Paulo was also very, very strong. I came this year. China was a good event, but also the events where we didn't really do necessarily well. I felt like I did a great Barcelona weekend. I felt like I did a great Silverstone, even Austria. Spa has been maybe one of my most complete weekends of my career. Qualifying, I was so happy with my performance, and I was P15. So that is really tough because the results really don't translate to performance. But with my personal team, like my coach and my manager and my physio, we try our best to look at things objectively, and even if we're not fighting for Q2 at times, it's important to try and make sure you're performing at a high level, and that doesn't really change based on performance. You need to remove performance from the equation in a way.
But Ollie, are Ferrari seeing what you're doing this year? Are they looking at the data still? I mean, you're...
I hope so because like I'm saying, it's easy to see those poor results and think nothing of them. Think that it's not going well. But like I said, on my side, I really feel the progression. I'm sure that they understand, and I think everybody who's watching closely understands what's going on. And yeah, that's.
Do you speak to Fred a lot, Fred Vasseur?
Not really. Not about racing. Not about how I'm doing and things like that. I mean, of course, he's a very, very busy guy, and we don't have much time to catch up. That's not really my job at the end to almost plead with him and ask him. But
because Ollie, it's interesting, isn't it? Amazing what a difference a year makes. Because we're speaking in Hungary. It was here a year ago where Lewis Hamilton was really frustrated. They need to change the driver, he was saying, after qualifying, wasn't he? And you were so in the mix. I think there are a lot of people thinking, is Bearman going to be in the Ferrari in 2026? And then you had that amazing run of, what was it, however many, 5 consecutive points finishes, something like that, which included Mexico and stuff like that. And yet a year on, it seems that Lewis has got his mojo back. It looks like he's going to stay at Ferrari for the foreseeable. I mean, what does the future look like for you now?
Yeah, of course, things have changed a lot, maybe in the last 6 months. And to be honest, as an F1 fan and a Lewis fan as well, because he's pretty much been at the front of. Well, he has been at the front of every race I remember watching since maybe 2012. He's always been in the mix. It's pretty cool to see him performing at the level he is, and seeing him on the top step in Barcelona was quite a special moment for British F1 in general. It was 3 Brits on the podium with the best British driver, the best driver we've ever seen in P1. I mean, that's something pretty special. Of course, in terms of my future, that's not ideal. But I'm still young. I'm only 21. I'm not in a huge rush, and for me, staying at Haas for the foreseeable is not a bad thing. I feel like there's a lot to learn at this team. There's a lot to still achieve. I really want to get back to those highs which we tasted in Mexico and other events. I feel like they're on a good trajectory, this team, and I'm really happy to be on the journey with it. It's a tough moment right now, and of course it's a really challenging one, and one that builds character, I would say. But I don't want to be defined as the team who had a really good first year with me, but then we really struggled to achieve that performance again. So hopefully we can get a bit more performance and score some good points again.
And I guess as the regulations mature, something you said earlier, the teams will get closer, the gains will get less, and that's when Haas maybe becomes a serious player again.
Given our challenges that we face at the moment, that looks to favour us a bit more. However, we have a very clear plan in place, which is to be fighting at the front of the midfield in the near future, on pure merit, and that's what we're targeting, and that hopefully means that one day, regardless of a new set of regs, an old set of regs, a high gradient of updates or whatever, we're going to be at the front, and that's what I hope to achieve with Haas.
You've just spoken very positively about Haas. I get it, but I'm going to put a question to you now, which is, the driver market looks quite fluid, right? And I'm thinking of Fernando Alonso. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? What's Fernando's future look like? Would you ever consider leaving the Ferrari family and take a punt on a team like Aston, were that to be an option, or are you 100% committed to the Ferrari program and what they've got planned?
No, I'm of course very much committed to what Ferrari have offered me, and they've supported me since the very beginning, since I joined F3, and I'm only sitting here thanks to them. So on one side, I owe a lot to Ferrari. I also, for me, Ferrari is the dream team, not only because I'm part of Ferrari, but just because it's the most iconic brand probably in the world. So my goal remains to be a Ferrari driver one day. That, at the moment is the case, and then, we need to see how things develop. Of course, I don't want to be sitting around for 3, 4, 5 years waiting for a seat to become available, because there's no guarantees, and then you can be wasting your best years. My ultimate goal is maybe a bit selfish, and that's okay, because that's the reason I'm here, and that's because I want to be fighting for world championships. So if I can have that opportunity wherever, I will take it. If that means it's not with Ferrari because they can't offer me that position, then that's life. That's not up to me. So yeah, of course I want to be fighting for wins, for championships, and whatever team I believe that's possible with, I'm happy to take the step with them. Aston Martin are going through a tough time, but I'm sure that one day they'll be incredibly strong. But I wouldn't say I'm looking towards them at this stage.
How much time do you spend in Maranello now? Because, half of Haas is based there, isn't it?
Yeah, we do a lot of simulator work. We still use Ferrari's simulator. They have two. They have one for their WEC program, for the academy, which I was using a lot, but also for Haas. And then, of course, the new one, which is just Ferrari F1. But, I would say that I'm there maybe 20 days a year, 20, 25 days a year. It's better than last year. Last year was not enough sim days, and I really struggled at the start of the year with that lack of sim work. And this year with the new regs, I really pushed the guys to get us at the sim as much as possible. But of course, it's a big expense for the team. However, it's been really, really positive, and I really enjoy coming back to Maranello because it's a huge part of my life. I lived there for 2 years or over 2 years.
Can you explain the story of how you became a Ferrari young driver? Because it's actually quite unusual for a Brit to end up with Ferrari. People sort of more traditionally go with the McLarens and the Mercedes, right?
It was quite funny actually with Kimi. We were talking that when we were racing in F2, I was the British guy with an Italian team, and he was the Italian guy with a British team in the sense that, the F1 team of Merc is based in the UK. No, I ended up with Ferrari, of course. At the time I was racing Formula 4, there was actually a lot of interest from 3 driver programs. Ferrari was the one that we ended up deciding on, just because the route looked the clearest and the most feasible to Formula 1. So in that sense we picked well, and I was winning in Formula 4 Italian Championship, which is quite a it's a very competitive one, probably the most competitive in Formula 4, and Ferrari invited us to come to their factory, And it was interesting because it was kind of like a football scouting, you know, where they actually test you firsthand, which wasn't really going to be the case with other academies. So yeah, that was really cool, and I was really happy to get the offer from Ferrari at the end.
When you say test you, what's Ferrari engineers were watching what you were doing in the car, or was it more of a physical test?
It was a bit of everything. We had physical testing, mental testing, also meetings with the big bosses. The time was Mattia and Laurent, who I still have a great relationship with, and I'm super thankful to them both for taking me on the program. But I guess the most important was the on-track testing. We were driving an F4 car in Fiorano, which is their test track. That was very special because, you know, I drove out of that famous Shell garage, which I'd seen videos of Michael, Fernando, Sebastian, all of these people. I mean, even now Lewis doing that. So it was a very special thing for me.
And you drove your first F1 car at Fiorano as well, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like it was a year and a half later that I was driving an F1 car out of those garage doors.
That is quite a steep curve. You're right. In terms of, did you choose well?
Yeah, that was
18 months.
Pretty impressive. So in 18 months, I went from driving an F4 car out that garage to driving an F1 car out that garage for my first F1 test, and with my parents there as well. It was an incredibly special day for me, and I still have the picture of myself with all of the mechanics and engineers that helped me on that day. And I mean, every time I often walk past the Ferrari garage, and I still have a great relationship with all of those mechanics because they gave me that opportunity for my first ever test, my first ever race as well. So no matter what, I always have, a bit of my heart with Ferrari.
Ollie, what is Fiorano like? I'll never forget, I was just starting in Formula One myself when Michael Schumacher moved from Benetton to Ferrari, and his first test at the end of 1995 at Fiorano, white overalls because he was still under contract to Benetton. He drives there, and I think it was turn one. He came straight in after his first run and said, "We need to change turn one because it doesn't represent any corner that we currently race at in Formula One." And I just thought, wow. Attention to detail.
Yeah.
First test with Ferrari, and you're saying
First lap.
This iconic racetrack. Mate, we've got to change
turn one.
Yeah. But what is it like? Is it really slow? Just lots of hairpins and.
Yeah, it's a slow speed track. They're very limited by space. But it's pretty perfect for testing. And back in the day, they would run like every day on that circuit. Back when testing was permitted pretty much whenever you wanted. Nowadays, it's a bit more restricted. But aside from the 1,000 fans standing around the perimeter of the circuit, it's a perfect track to do your first F1 test, and also an iconic one as well. I mean, driving in Fiorano is something that not many people get to do. It's very special.
You clearly have a feel for the history of the sport as well. When you're in Maranello, can you sense 76 years of F1 history, the only team that's raced every year?
Yeah, it's very special, and talking with some people who'd been there for a very long time, since the Schumacher era and even prior to that, it's really cool to see how they speak about Michael, and going through some parts of the factory which are, let's say, haven't been updated recently, still have pictures of those guys, and Kimi and Felipe and all of these guys who are really the backbone of this century of Ferrari. So yeah, it's incredibly special, and actually there's a very cool staircase which has every car that they've ever won the Constructors' Championship with, and that's really, really special.
Going back to the 50s, right?
Back to the very beginning, back to the first ever car they won the Constructors with. So it's cool to see the history and how much success Ferrari has had. It's very special and humbling.
This episode is brought to you by Bitdefender, exclusive cybersecurity partner of Scuderia Ferrari HP. In cybersecurity and Formula One, every millisecond counts. Only the most advanced cars and dedicated teamwork win races on the track, and only the most advanced security technology and elite specialists have the power to prevent, defend, and stop cyber attacks. Technology makes all the difference in who has a clear advantage, where Bitdefender is renowned for driving leading-edge innovation. Bitdefender supports Ferrari in strengthening its cybersecurity posture. They improve the cybersecurity team's operations and support resilient performance across a large and complex global environment. It's a partnership built on trust, a shared confidence in the technology, the expertise, and the ability to respond effectively as the threat landscape evolves. So join the millions of consumers and businesses that trust Bitdefender to protect their digital worlds. Visit bitdefender.com to learn more about how Bitdefender supports Ferrari through cybersecurity built on trust and how you can make your digital life safer. While we're talking history, can I talk to you now about Senna's Lotus? Ayrton Senna, 1985.
Yeah.
You drove it at Silverstone, didn't you? And I saw the feature on Sky, and you were really emotional. Tell us, why did that car make you so emotional?
I think it was a mixture of things. Well, the most important was that it was the exact chassis that Ayrton won his first ever race in. You know, for me, Ayrton Senna, I never got to watch him live, of course. By 10 years, I didn't make it. But, you know, he's someone that everybody regarded as the absolute best. And you know, it was such a tragic day in 1994. And, you know, for me, driving his first ever car with his mechanic running the car, his engineer was there, you know, on the day with me in Silverstone. It was just such an emotional moment for me, sharing it with my father, with my girlfriend, who've been with me along these huge steps, and just knowing the history of Ayrton and his, you know, amazing career and tragic end. It was a very powerful moment for me, and I knew, to be honest, I knew that I would get really emotional, because with these things I sometimes really can't control, you know, these emotions. And I knew it, you know, that as soon as my manager told me what I was going to be doing, which was a month before, I knew that it was going to be a really powerful day. And driving the car was really one of the best days of my life. And yeah, I think, you know, that those emotions hit me really hard after.
And what was the car like to drive? I mean, you got an H-pattern stick shift.
Yeah.
Was that? I mean,
It's a throwback.
You've never raced a stick shift, right?
Never.
So how did you find that?
Also, to be honest, my first car was, of course, a manual, so I know how to drive manual. That's obvious. But being British and having a right-hand drive car, the gearbox or the gear stick is on the left side. So I'm really good with a manual on the left side. And if it's ever a manual race car, I feel great and very fluid with it. But being the right hand, and also since I'm left-handed, it just felt really strange to have the gearbox on the right side. But, you know, I got used to it. To be honest, at Silverstone, with it being such a high-speed track, you don't have to do many gear changes. If it was like Hungary, I would have struggled a lot more to get around. But yeah, it was, to be honest, you know, you have the first lap of getting used to it and feeling all of the things, the turbo lag and getting used to the heel and toe.
Did you do that?
Yeah, of course, it's important, otherwise you can damage the gearbox. When they told me that there's only one of these cars and it's like worth 15 million, I was like, oh my gosh, hope I don't get this wrong. But once I got used to that, and especially in the high speed section when you're only having to, you know, do one downshift and it's not that, you know, intensive in terms of the manual gearbox, the car felt impressively Formula One-esque. You know, I was expecting a big step to go back there.
What, in terms of grip?
You know, in terms of grip, stiffness, liveliness. You know, the car is so light, so it was also really nervous and alive. It was just incredibly cool to drive. It had a lot of power, but also good drivability. So yeah, I to be honest, I was really enjoying it, and I would have loved to have a full test day in a car like that to get the most out of it. Maybe not that one because it's worth like 15 million and I'm sure that I would crunch a gear at some point, but yeah, maybe one of the cars that Ayrton didn't drive but was racing in that era, you know, one that's worth a whole lot less.
It's so fun to hear you speaking so enthusiastically about about a car like that. And did you then jump from that into the TPC Haas? Am I right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But to be honest,
how different was that? The sort of 2-year-old?
Yeah,
Haas?
I mean, I didn't. I got back in the F1 of last year. I drove it just after, and it was totally normal. You know, it was just what I'm used to.
Where did you drive
having
it?
to do? I drove it in Jerez. It was really fun, very hot, very, very hot. So maybe not ideal for the tires, but you know, nice to feel some downforce again after having driven these 2026 cars, which are obviously missing a bit. But it was funny with the Senna car. I did 2 laps, and at the end of the second lap I thought, okay, actually now I feel quite confident. I've understood the gears and everything. I know what gear to be in for every corner, so let's push a bit more. And I remember they were incredibly strict about me only doing 3 laps. You know, they said, come on, the engine's been built, rebuilt, and you know, we can't afford to you know, damage it or anything.
And
so
you're thinking 15 million.
Exactly.
Yeah.
3 lap limit, really hard. And he said, okay, when you see the camera car, because that was the camera car on track, when you see it on the exit of Maggots Beck, it's just pull in behind and follow it back to the pits. But I remember thinking, just as going into Maggots Beck, as I thought, I can't stop yet. I've just got started, you know. So I remember doing one more lap.
What, you overtook the camera car?
I went straight past the camera car, flat out. All of the pit wall were not watching anymore because they're expecting me to come into the pits, and I flew past for one more, and that was a real glory lap. I really enjoyed it, and I remember coming in, the brakes had a bit of smoke coming off them because I was really, really pushing on it on the last lap. It was super fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, look, let's end this by just throwing it forward to the rest of this year. You mentioned earlier that you got the upgrade coming. Just look, you're 13th in the championship now. You finished 13th last year. What are your goals?
Well, not to finish 13th again. I don't want that to become a trend. Like my run of P11s last year.
You did own that for a while.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So to be honest, I would love a few P11s right now. That would be a good result. But no, it's for me the goal is purely on personal performance, because I'm not in control of you know, how fast our competition is, and nor are we really in control of how fast we are at certain moments. So, you know, I'm doing my very best to continue to perform well. And for me, this, you know, successful second half of the year will be looking back at Budapest and thinking, okay, since Budapest, I'm clearly able to achieve, you know, better results, better performances, and drive at a higher level. For me, if I can have that continued improvement, that's the sign of a good second half of the year. And some points would also be nice.
Can you tell us about the gap between you and Esteban as well? Because I've been looking purely at qualifying, which seems the most sensible way to look at it. Where's the gap opened up?
I feel like I can only speak about myself. On my side, I feel like I've been able to do much more consistent qualifyings. I've been able to put the car in a better setup window as well compared to last year, to always give myself the best opportunity to get the most out of it. And generally, I just feel like I'm performing at a much higher level than I was last year, where last year I would always end up doing a little mistake in a qualifying lap somewhere, trying to get that last 10th and lose 2, and you know, that would put me behind Esteban. Whereas now, understanding the tires and the car and the sport a bit more, I understand to leave maybe that half a tenth on the table or quarter of a tenth on the table to guarantee consistency, you know. So I feel like I'm doing really consistent and good qualifying performances, and that's an area where I've always been on, you know, on the strong side, and this year I've done another step forward in that regard, so I'm really happy with that.
How you're even able to visualize half a tenth, quarter of a tenth, that's
it's little
right?
thing. Maybe, you know.
No, but I'm not doubting you.
You feel like you're leaving it
extraordinary. It's
you
amazing.
feel like you're leaving it on the table. You know, you say, okay, maybe I could push the entry a little bit more here, but you know, with the car we have, which is maybe a bit difficult to predict at times, is it worth taking that risk? Because if I have a snap, I'm going to lose 2 tenths or more. Yeah. And weighing up that risk reward is something that I'm doing a better job of now than I was 6 months or even 12 months ago.
Well, the car performance isn't there. Do you take some confidence from what Kimi Antonelli is doing? You know, he was your teammate in F2. You went toe-to-toe together. I mean, who can forget your race in Monaco? But anyway.
That was good.
It's good, wasn't it? But do you take some confidence saying, you know, Kimi having the year he's having, you just need the right car and
No, I take a huge amount of confidence in that, and that's why I it's probably why I can sleep well at night. You know, knowing that Kimi, even Isaac, you know, these are guys who are performing incredibly well in cars that are also very fast. It proves to me that I have what it takes because I've raced these guys throughout my junior career and have stacked up, you know, positively against them. So that tells me that it's just a matter of time. I'm not in a rush, but when I get the car that can win races, I'm gonna win races.
I think that's a brilliant place to end it. Look, Ollie, thank you so much for your time. Best of luck.
Thank you.
With everything. Can I stop by the bike shop for a coffee?
Of course. Friends and family discount.
Thanks.
Plus 20%. That's the
Hang on. Discount plus 20%. All right. Thanks, mate. Good luck
Good
with
stuff.
everything.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.